Excellent. Nobody associates the idea of skiing with the island of Crete. Nobody at all. So that when we checked into our hotel in Chania with all the luggage and skis and bags and clobber that we ski tourists bring with us, one of the receptionists asked me whether we were sure we'd come to the right island. I first put on skis when I was 6. My father had been posted to work in Beirut, and this was under the cedars in Lebanon. And probably that is one of the reasons why the combination of skiing and the Mediterranean has always really appealed to my imagination. So whether it's the Abruzzi or the Alps or the Pyrenees or the Sierra Nevada, the mountains of Lebanon, if it's between Mount Toubkal above Marrakesh or Elbrus in South Russia, I'm on for it. So some years ago, when Ingram mentioned that she and Huel had been skiing in Crete, it naturally fell straight on my TTD things to do list. So I then spoke to Jim Blythe, who is of all world skiing, the Scottish guide. He lives in Chamonix, with whom I've done about 20 tours now, all over the place. And he gathered together a group, and in 2018, we set out to ski Crete, but there was no snow. So Jim always brings with him a local guide, and the local guide was Georgios, who is the guardian of the Astraka hut in the Zagori circuit in Epirus in northwestern Greece. And so instead of doing Crete, we skied on Mount Parnassus, and then we skied in Epirus. And if you haven't walked and skied in the Zagori circuit, put it on your to-do list. It's wonderful walking in the summer, and it's great skiing in the winter, but it wasn't Crete. 2019 was busy, but we made a second attempt, and in March of 2020, this year, we set off to Athens to go and ski in Crete. And now I am going to share screen. Here we have it. This is the island of Crete. There are 3 areas in which you can ski. In the east is Mount Spati above Agios Nikolaos, and that is about 2,150 meters. In the middle is Mount Psiloritis, which the Greeks used to know as Mount Ida, and that was supposed to be the birthplace of Zeus. And that is the highest mountain, 2,456 meters. And in the west, the larger chunk are the White Mountains, the Lefti Ora, where the highest mountain is Mount Patnes, which is just 3 meters shorter than Psiloritis, 2,453. We gathered together a party of 8 or 9 people, 2 women, 7 men, and Jim and Georgios. And for the White Mountains, the 3-day traverse of the White Mountains, we had 2 other Greek guys who came along with us to help carry and to just be good company. So on Saturday, March the 7th, we flew off from Athens straight to Heraklion, and we flew up and down and up and down and up and down outside Heraklion, having a very good view of it and of the snowy mountains behind. But the wind was so strong, it kept buffeting us, we couldn't land. So we flew back to Athens, spent hours queuing to get into an airport hotel, slept for 4 hours, and then flew back the next day. Unfortunately, that delay meant that we could not go and climb and ski on Mount Spati in the east. Pity, but we had to concentrate on what we had available with time. So we landed at Heraklion, immediately piled into 2 minibuses, and drove to a village called Manias, which is on the north side of that central brown area, the north side of Psiloritis. And there we arrived. Extremely nice people in the taverna of Manias. They didn't seem to mind us piling in, immediately stripping down, getting into our ski clothes, getting on all our kit, and going straight off to see whether we could climb and ski on the north side of Mount Psiloritis. And we did pretty well. We climbed for about 2.5, 3 hours, did about 750, 800 meters, and had an agreeable ski down. The weather, as you can see, wasn't that terrific, but the snow was well converted, and it was actually a lovely ski down. We then went back to Manias. Again, the Taverna people were extremely nice. They fed us, let us change, and we drove straight on, again, via a little town called Rethymno. We seem to drive through Rethymno every day. I can't remember it. It's eminently forgettable, but I remember the name and we were always going through it. And we then went to a village called Amari on the south slope of Psiloritis, looking forward to climbing on and skiing the south side of Mount Ida. That day dawned really awful, terrible wind, absolutely no visibility, dreadful weather, and so we really were committed to a down day. And a down day it was. We did a bit of tourism driving through Rethymno, this village, and eventually got to a monastery, a place called Arkadi, where in 1866, 2,000 Greek independence fighters were besieged by the Ottoman Turks. 1,000 of the men all died, and that left about 800 women and children who crowded into a church where they were blessed by the priest, who then set fire to the church, and that was the end of all of them. That was a real down day experience, on a total down day. And I remember Ingram's words now saying, the snow was difficult to reach. It was difficult to get there, and this was a real down day. 20,000 years ago, there were pygmy elephants and pygmy hippos on Crete. Would have been lovely to see them, but we hunted them out. And then there were the Minoans, and this was the birthplace of El Greco, and of course of Zeus. None of that was really on my mind as we drove around again through Rethymno, getting back to Amari, where we got early to bed, hoping that the next day would be better. And the next day was better, sort of better. We set out through these sort of conditions, and as I left the minivan, my mobile pinged with an email from Aegean Airlines to say that the flight that was going to take me from Crete to Athens to connect with my BA flight back to London had been cancelled, and I would not be able to get my BA flight. This was a bit of a problem because you remember everyone was talking about lockdown and not being able to fly and all the rest of it. I didn't want to be stuck on Crete. So after 2 hours of skinning through these conditions here, Jim looked back and said, are we all on for going on? And I said, well, actually, Jim, j'ai la pêche, mais pas la morale. I'm fit enough, but I don't have the heart for this. So it was agreed that I would follow the tracks back. And as I was going, the cloud lifted, and I actually found some really nice slopes to ski, and I forgot about the tracks. So I got some way down, had a lovely little ski for a few minutes, put on my skins, climbed back up, and went again. Did that 2 or 3 times, and then reached the road and decided, well, the vans are obviously to the right. After 20 minutes walking, the vans were obviously to the left. So after 40 minutes walking, I arrived back at the vans, and just in time because it started to rain. I then spent the rest of that day in the minibus with the rain pouring down, wearing out my battery, trying to reach Aegean Airlines with no success. And eventually I got through to Jenny, my wife, who said, no problem. And she did book me onto a flight from Crete to Athens. I'd forgotten to mention it should be from Chania. So I got a ticket from Heraklion, but what's a 4-hour taxi ride when you at least can get out? Usually, when you sit something out, people say, oh, how could you? You really missed. What a day you missed. None of that today. Everyone got back to the vans in the early afternoon, drenched through. They had, to their credit, arrived at the summit. This is the summit of Mount Psiloritis with a bell. I never heard the bell ring, and I don't know if you would with all that ice, but they'd got there. But when they got back to the vans, they definitely decided that this was time for a drink and a change. So we drove back to Amari, where we changed, and then drove on to Chania. And the evening was beautiful, and there in the distance are the White Mountains. And after rather a difficult start to this holiday, this tour, my heart rather lifted. And I remembered again Ingram's words, the snow is difficult to reach. It had been difficult to reach, but we were on our way. So the next day, it dawned bright and beautiful, absolutely wonderful. So we got into the vans and we drove not through Rethymno this time, for a couple of hours, quite a long way to get there, until the road was blocked by boulders. So there we got out and kitted up, said goodbye to the vans, and set off skinning. And this was the first day of the 3-day traverse of the White Mountains. It was a 15-kilometer horizontal and a small 1,200 meter climb. Absolutely lovely conditions, fresh, lovely, easy climbing that's going along. You see, as we got higher, lovely open slopes, the sea in the background. Wonderful, steady climbing. We reached then to a pass, and we were hoping to climb to the summit of Mount Melidou, but 100 meters short, we were really beaten about by the wind so badly that we decided the best thing to do was to retreat. So we skied down, lovely open. This is what the French call the ski de retraité, pensioner skiing. Makes you feel you ski better than a pro. Easy, soft slopes, and it was lovely converted spring snow, great day. And we arrived at the hut. And this was the hut, the Katsavelli hut, correctly known as the Christos Koliopoulos hut, because Christos Koliopoulos built it. To stay there, you have to be a member of the Chania Mountain Association or a friend. Luckily, we had 2 men along from Chania, Manolos and Lavros, who carried a great deal of the bags in, which was very kind of them. And it's a pretty simple place. There's no loo. The water lands on the roof and is carried down to a tank underneath and then pumped up. And that is, walking in with the turquoise trousers, is Heidi, who is a Norwegian lady who was with us. And as she's walking in, she is saying to her partner, Elspeth, 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 Elspeth. And her voice, as she got in, she saw how limited these conditions were. She was a bit taken aback, but both she and Audrey, the other lady, were very good about this, and we all sorted it out in a very gentlemanly way. And there we were in the hut. You really need to stay in this hut because it is exactly halfway between the beginning and the end of the traverse. And if you stay the day, you can access the mountains around. Manolos and Lavros were very good company, and they brought with them a whole quantity of a translucent alcoholic liquid, which certainly helped enormously, particularly since we all forget things. They forgot to bring anything for breakfast. So the breakfast tended to be cold leftovers of what had been there the night before. And that was either cold spaghetti or cold whatever. So the breakfasts were not great. However, the skiing was going to be good. It took some effort to get us out of the hut because the wind blew around it. It's built on a col, this hut, and it catches all the wind, and the wind in Crete is unforgettable. So to go out for a pee was really an act of great courage. And we all hung around in the morning until Jim and Georgios said, well, we're going out now, lads. And we went out, and look what we saw. Just beautiful, clear blue day, all these slopes, everything, all directions, facing in all north, south, east, west, everywhere. In the middle of Crete, which nobody associates with skiing. Nobody there, not a sound, no light pollution at night, just wonderful condition. Here we are, we were going up and down, really yo-yoing. The aim was to reach to the summit of Mount Pachnes, which we'd come quite some kilometers now, going up and down all over the place. Here we are going up. This is near the summit of Mount Pachnes. This just says it all, of course. Here we are on the top of Mount Pachnes. We're not lying down because we're lazy. We're not lying down because we're not triumphant having got to the peak. We're lying down because you couldn't stand up because the wind was so fierce that we had to crawl to the top and crawl to put our skis back on and then ski down through what have to be admitted to be magnificent conditions. Having got to the bottom, we yo-yoed up and did more slopes. Absolutely exhilarated, exhausted at the end of the day when we got back to the hut. but so happy to have had the day. Wishing we could stay longer, even in this accommodation. We then slept, and the next morning, again, breakfast, as you can see in the top left, is my ski buddy, Harley Knott, who was on the party, and also his son, James, my godson. And as you can see from Harley's face, breakfast was not great. The wind was again blowing so hard outside. It took Georgios and Jim great determination to say, well, you've all got to go out now. And we did go out, put on our skis. And as soon as we got out of the wind, we got into this wonderful calm. And there was a 15-kilometer continuation out to the end of the traverse. We skied down, we skinned up, we skied down, we skinned up. We skinned up. Sometimes we took off skis and booted up in all directions, going north, south, east, west. I was so enjoying it. The climbing was so invigorating and so focusing, and the skiing down was just so lovely that I really lost all sense of direction and just completely got into the zone. Here we are. You can see these wonderful, easy, open slopes, long climbs up through these valleys. I no longer had any idea where I was going, just as well there were guides. You see the tracks in the background. That was one nice slope that we did. We had probably 10, 15 of those slopes in the day. It was absolutely wonderful, and we yo-yoed up and took in every opportunity we could. Look at that, this is Crete, this is the middle of the Mediterranean. Nobody else there. Once again, ski de retraité, just pensioner skiing. You feel you're skiing wonderfully. The sun came out, it was hot, it was beautiful. Here we are getting near to the final descent. That's the Mediterranean in the background. And here we have it, we'd arrived. This is the final descent we were going down. I think it's at this point that I drew up to Harley and said, oh, Harley, look at that, what a view. But you can't see Africa. To which I think it was Harley who said, partly due, of course, to the fact that we're looking north towards Greece. And the evidence of that is that just beneath, on the skyline, right to the right, there is Mount Psiloritis, which is being irritatingly open and having wonderful weather. And had it a few days before, we would have had a different experience there too. But that is the Aegean Sea. And so this is the same view from another angle. Then the wonderful, easy, long ski down with the Mediterranean in the background. Wonderful spring snow in full conversion. Carried on down to the very end of the snow where we took off skis. And then the area in the background was of very rough rock, and there were deep crevasses in it. Some of them 3 or 4 feet wide, and we had to jump them. And if you didn't make it, it would have been a very horrible landing, 10 or 15 feet beneath on rocks. So that was the only moment of real objective danger. But we walked out, skied out, skinned out. It took about 3 or 4 hours to get from the end of the snow, the walk out. And once again, I remembered Ingram's words, the snow is hard to reach. Well, it is hard to reach in Crete. But I loved it. It was a complete scramble for all of us. We did toute montagne, tout terrain, all mountain, all terrain. And here's Audrey coming down the last decline. And then eventually we got to the village of Assifou, where we were met by some very welcoming barmen. And I had a final little triumph because I play a little backgammon. And on the right is the backgammon champ of Assifou. And the dice rolled with me. And I think I am now the reigning and uncontested backgammon champion of Assifou, because nobody has contested since then. So that was Crete. I have to say, it was the most wonderful experience. To begin with, difficult to get there, had to try twice. To begin with, difficult to keep morale up, what with Aegean Airlines and COVID and wind and being turned back. And that made the 3-day traverse of the Lefki Ora of the White Mountains even more stunning than it would have been anyway. But the skiing there was simply, simply unforgettable. And that was Crete. So now I'm finished.
Good. Most excellent. Wonderful presentation, Robert. I must admit, it looks absolutely stunning, and I would definitely love to follow in your footsteps on that one. So, right, if anybody wants to ask a question, if you can press the a thumbs up, it'll prompt, and I'll open up the microphone for you so you can ask a question. Any questions in there? Right. So we've had, so Adrian, so we've actually had we've actually had a question from Adrian. I'll sort of open up to talk. Adrian, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Hi, Robert, it's Aidan. My question,
Aidan, sorry.
No problem. My question, although that was Emma that typed it in, was more around what is the most satisfying part of a day on a trip like that? Is it the climbing, the skiing, the fact that you're able to ski in a place like that? I'm just interested. What's the most satisfying bit of it for you?
It is the, can you hear me? It is the whole combination of it. It is the, you have to be responsible for yourself. You are with people who you very much like to get on with. You are away from the crowds. The climbing is a matter of focus and steady energy, and you have to be in a good mood. If you get into a bad mood, it affects your breathing, and you can't climb so easily and so strongly. And then when you get to the top, the descent is just pure bliss. So it's a combination of things. It's the people, it's the physical activity, and it's the integration with nature. It's altogether wonderful. And then if you're in an island like Crete, also the culture of the people, the food, the views, everything else, the history, it's a total immersion experience.
Okay, right, thank you. Right, so we have a question from Roger Bernstinger. Roger, if you can unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Now you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yes. So my question is that I have skied in Crete. I'm not sure whether the mountains are as high as that. They're Mount Olympus. But it was superb skiing. And I have been to Crete, but only in the summer, and I've only done concerts there. But I was interested because the mountains look very similar. They're very rounded on the whole. Have you, Robert, have you been to Crete? The mountains there, perhaps in the summer?
I've been there also in the summer as well, but it's Crete that I'm talking about. Are you talking about Olympus? Because I've never seen Olympus.
Yes, I am, on Crete. No, on Cyprus. Sorry, I'm stupid, I'm confused.
Roger,
I'm talking about Cyprus.
Roger, I would love to go to Cyprus. I think the Todros Mountains are worth a bit of skiing, but people saying it's a long way to go for very little skiing. But I am tempted one day to go. And I don't know whether Ingram and Hugh have been there, but if they have, I will be on their heels.
Well, I was there when I did my national service, and that was a very, very long time ago, with skis. That's my, the other question I had is you didn't seem to be carrying big sacks with a sleeping bag and all the stuff to eat, even if you didn't have breakfast.
This is true. We didn't have heavy sacks. There are blankets in the Katsivelli hut, and Manolos and Lavros, very strong young men in their 30s, did a lot of the carrying of the food, which was really, really good of them. They can be forgiven for getting the breakfast because they did bring up this wonderful translucent alcoholic liquid, which was very nice to have.
You were very
Packs
lucky.
weren't heavy, no.
You were very lucky.
You were, Roger.
Finish. Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. We've got a question from John Barnard. John, I will allow you to talk. You can ask your question.
Hi, thanks for that excellent talk, Robert. I was wondering, is there a sort of defined season where there's reliable snow? You were obviously fairly lucky in the period you picked, which I think was early March, you said. But I was wondering whether that was, you know, pure luck, whether it would be better to go in February or what?
Pure luck, John, pure luck. As I said, in 2018, there was no snow. Progressively, there is getting less snow because of global warming. I think we were lucky, and I had hoped that we would be going earlier in February, but it didn't fit with Jim Blythe's other program, so we couldn't change that. But I think we were lucky, yes. But it is a matter of touch and go. You really can't count on snow in Crete, but when it's there, it's worth going for, John.
Yes, it sounds rather similar to the problems in Morocco,
yes.
where you know, I've attempted to ski twice and failed on both occasions.
Yes, yep. You need a lot of luck to go there, and they're distant places to get to, so it's very frustrating if you've gone all there and then you're just walking around. I know the problem.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. Right, so we've actually got a question from Alex Miller. So Alex, if you can unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
I enjoyed that very much. I wanted to ask how much of a concern were avalanches, and I asked that because I was invited by French friends to go ski touring in Crete, but I couldn't go. And on the last day, one of them died in a small avalanche, and her neck was broken. And they were, I think, partly bad luck, but I just wanted to know what your view on the terrain was with respect to avalanches.
Alex, I'm so sorry to hear about that. That's just appalling. My God. I think we stayed on relatively safe slopes. I've got to be honest here, as an ASC member, I should be skiing without a guide, but I love life and I fear avalanches. And therefore, I go with Jim Blythe, and who you know, and I have been so far very lucky. No, there was no avalanche danger when we were there. I think conditions were favorable, but of course, the mountains are the mountains and snow is snow. I'm so sorry to hear about that experience.
Okay, right. So are there any, right, well, I don't think there are any more questions coming up. So again, thank you for a most wonderful talk, Robert, and we will switch over to Declan. So if you can mute yourself, Robert, and Declan, I think.
Hello.
You should now be the presenter. Yes, there you are on screen. So Declan is going to talk to us about, he was one of the few people who got away this winter, and I'm very envious of that, but he got away to Romania, and let's hear about ski touring in Romania. Over to you.
Thank you, Roger. Evening, everyone. It's a pity not to be hosting this as usual at the Alpine Club, but given the circumstances, it's still a pleasure to be presenting this virtually to you all. And thanks, Roger, for hosting. Let me get my slides up. And bear with me. Here we go. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a very enjoyable ski tour we had to Romania this year before COVID took over. 15 to 22nd of February, to be precise. Now, Romania is only a little off the beaten track for ski touring. It's neither remote nor inaccessible, and I suspect that it's been visited by many in the room. I'm aware, for example, of the ASC tour in 2013, led by Alan Davies, to the Bucegi and Piatra ranges south of Brasov, we also visited that area. So the trip was the idea of Tommy Herceg. This is Tommy. He's born and reared in Romania till his early teens, and he's now a school teacher in West London. Tommy has hiked and climbed extensively in Romania, and he was keen to lead his first ski tour for the Eagle Ski Club to Romania. He was our linguist and our cultural ambassador and group leader, and in the very modern way, he was thoroughly proficient in organizing a ski tour on the hoof via a phone, with near instant snow reports, avalanche forecasts, hot openings, accommodation and restaurant bookings, etc. He was invaluable in so many ways, and a font of knowledge on the history, culture, and culinary specialities of Romania, including his favorite, ciorba de burcă, which is tripe soup. So let me get the school atlas out, and just to show you the Carpathian Mountains in an arc down through Central and Eastern Europe, from the Tatra in Slovakia and Poland down to the Southern Carpathians in Romania. These mountains form a reverse L shape, which is a natural and a historic barrier between the plains of Romania and Transylvania, which was for long periods part of the Hungarian Empire. Now, we flew into Cluj-Napoca. I'm not sure whether there still is, but there was a Wizz Air flight from Luton to Cluj. Myself and Philippa headed out for a couple of days in advance, just to explore the old town of Cluj. It's the unofficial capital of the Transylvania region, and it's home to universities, vibrant nightlife, and landmarks dating back to Saxon and Hungarian rule. It was the European youth capital in 2015 and European city of sport in 2018. It has a vibrant cafe culture and seemed to have as many hipster coffee shops and bars as pre-COVID Shoreditch. Now, our original objective was to tour in the Rodney Mountains to the northeast of Cluj. And this was where we were intending to go. It's one of the higher ranges in Romania, up to about 2,300 meters. It's also the most northerly, so we were hoping for cold, dry snow and good skiing terrain. It's got a sort of an east-west ridge that offers skiing on different aspects, and it can be accessed from various passes. So we had a rough plan for an itinerary with some day tours from the valley and some hut-based touring. Unfortunately, however, from 2 weeks before, it became apparent that Romania, like much of Europe last January, February, was having a low snow season, and there was less than 20 centimeters of snow in the Rodney. We kept hoping and watching the snow data in the week leading up to the trip, but we were not overly optimistic. So when we all met up at Cluj Airport for a group discussion on snowpack, weather and options, we weren't expecting much. Storm conditions from the west and some snowfall had brought some snow, but there was still only about 30 centimeters of snow base in Rodney, and with a warm front forecast to come in while we were there, Tommy reckoned that it'd be better that we headed south to the Fagaras range for a more reliable snowpack. So this was where then we switched our objectives to the Făgăraș southeast of Cluj. Now, the Făgăraș is a high ridge running east to west. It has many of the highest mountains in Romania, including Moldoveanu here, 2,544 meters. It is a bit more technical terrain. We knew that, but we hoped that there would be snow, and we were hoping for a versatile range of ski touring options that we could access. Specifically, we were interested in the terrain to the western end of the range. So we had hire cars, and we drove about 250k southeast from Cluj along modern motorways and some smaller roads, some of which we shared with horses and carts, but only some. And we traveled on and to spend the night at a mountain hotel just here, and we were aiming to get up to a hut here. So the next morning we set off up the track, up through mixed forest, only a little bit of bushwhacking, soon at the skinning snow line, and then skinning up to the hut. This is the Cabana Barcăciu, situated on a sunny shoulder about 1,500 meters. It was fairly basic, but comfortable for us, and it was run by an elderly couple who incredibly lived there all year round for both winter and summer seasons. They were supported by their son Mihai, who equally incredibly carried in all the supplies right through the winter on his back. Initially, we were the only guests. Mihai was an active ski tourer, and he was keen to promote ski touring from the hut. And he organizes a ski touring festival there every year, mid-March, with some financial support from Mammut. So there was lots of Mammut stickers around. The hut had an assortment of initially ferocious, and then docile guard dogs. It had some very effective tile stoves in the dorms to heat up. It had good food and beer. And this is the team. Glyn Andrew, Alex Wellings, myself, Philippa, Tommy Hercheg, and Dave Smith. And I don't know, some of them may be in the audience, and if they are, I'm grateful for all of the photos which I've used. So that first afternoon, we set off on an exploratory mission up out of the trees above the hut, just to gain the sort of the ridge, a subsidiary ridge above the hut, from where we could see the lie of the land and what might be skiable. There was some quite steep ridge lines and technical terrain, and without any guidebooks or hard information, we were reliant on what we could see or what we could glean from the maps or what Mihai could tell us. Though we did actually meet that afternoon 3 ski tourers from Bucharest. They were skiing down, and they were able to describe their day's touring and how they accessed onto the main ridge. As I've mentioned, the Făgăraș is a long, high ridge, generally 2,000 to 2,500 meters, and it's buttressed by these steep wooded slopes reaching down to the surrounding plains. There are some huts, but traversing these spurs to the other huts was not particularly attractive. I think the huts are sited more for summer hiking, and they didn't look easily accessible across the line of the main ridge. So we decided to spend a couple of days where we were at the Cabana Barcăciu and attempt summits from there. just to show the terrain, that last picture was looking south from here, from this subsidiary ridge. And this next picture is looking south, southeast to the rest of the main ridge. So I think there is a hut somewhere in here, but as I say, it would have been difficult to get across to it. So anyway, there was enough to go at, and the next morning we headed off, traversing through thick forest and then around some subsidiary spurs to get into a valley and to ascend up to the main ridge. It was hot, quite hot, and the snow was clumping on all our skins, some more than others, but it was slowing progress considerably. And despite scraping and waxing our skins, eventually myself and Philippa opted to return to the hut. However, the others continued on, and they were rewarded with colder snow higher up. And they were able to ski up onto this sunny shoulder here with just a steep ramp to get up onto the main ridge. So just a little bit of a steep skin up there. And then once on the main ridge, there was spectacular views south, some rather less snow on the southern side, as you'd imagine, but spectacular views south, and along the ridge, more rockier summits to the east. But the ridge was quite spectacular, and it was quite sharp and technical in places. It would not be a simple traverse in winter if you wanted to do it end to end, for example. So the team opted to turn west and head for the attractive summit of Varfellsgjara, which is 2306. This was just short distance to the west and overlooking the hut. It was the summit we could see from the hut. It was easily reached via traverse on the south side. The ski down was a bit tricky, and you can just see here, this is Dave and Tommy taking a direct line down the north face through some steep and rocky terrain before then traversing back out to gain the subsidiary ridge. So yeah, it was by all accounts an interesting and challenging ski, not somewhere you'd like to fluff a turn. So they had a good view, and they'd identified some other potential ski summits along the ridge. So the next day we headed out again, and this time to try and bypass the warm snow, we headed directly up from the hut, a more steeper descent onto the ridge. And from there we were able to ski down and across into this bowl and wind our way across again up onto the shoulder and up on the ramp to the main ridge. Unfortunately, once we got onto the main ridge, the views disappeared into a rising cloud bank. We continued on for a short distance to an emergency shelter, which was full of snow because the door had been left open. But we regrouped there and decided in the deteriorating weather that we should abandon any summit intentions and head back down. We retraced our steps in poor visibility, and using a mix of GPS, map and compass, and mobile phone, we worked our way down. Interestingly, mobile phone was far the best option as it had the best maps. Needless to say, I don't have any photos of the ski down. So we regrouped back at the hut, and in the face of a poor forecast for the next couple of days, a warm front coming through as we knew, we decided that we had done most of what we could from the cabana, and we decided to move southeast to the Bucegi plateau, where we knew that because of its height, there would be snow. So we just drove on around. From our first day, the weather was pretty poor, and we just had a day of lift accessed skiing from the ski station above the village of Sanai. It was cold, icy, and windswept. But the next day, we ventured on to stay at this hut, the Cabana Pietrasa, which was easily reached from the ski station. This was a big concrete barrack of a building, more like a hotel. It's used as a training venue for the Romanian Olympic teams. And apart from some Romanian canoeists, we had the place to ourselves. So from there, we accessed the Bucegi Plateau. It's relatively featureless and posed some navigational challenge in the weather we had. It's got some mushroom rock formations emerging out of the gloom. This is us in front of the Sphinx. And we did have some gaps in the cloud, and we ascended up to the summit of this Kariman peak, 2,400 meters. From there, we had fleeting views down over the spectacular cliffs to Heroes Cross, which is an enormous cross overlooking the valley to commemorate soldiers lost in the First World War. And this cross we could see from our valley base. That's it up there. This is from the village of Busteni, where we stayed in the valley. Now, speaking of accommodation, Tommy had really worked his phone, and he had sourced some luxurious accommodation. This is where we stayed in the valley. This is the former residence of the governor of the Bank of Romania, now converted into a guest house. So we certainly weren't roughing it. We did have some time for sightseeing and from some cultural highlights. This is the Peles Castle, a neo-Renaissance palace of the deposed Romanian royal family. This is the courtyard. Now, the Carpathians are famous for their wildlife, wolves and bear, and Romania has the largest brown bear population in Europe. And although the bear is popular, or well represented in popular iconography, we didn't see any. So that was our trip, and in summary, despite the enforced last-minute change of plan and some mixed weather, the week was a great success, and we thoroughly enjoyed our ski touring in an unfamiliar country. There is plenty of ski touring potential there, some really beautiful and quiet mountains, and there is an extensive network of huts that are open in winter. So I would certainly go back. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Wonderful, a fascinating talk, and you actually seem to have covered an awful lot of interesting terrain as well. So, right, so if people want to ask a question, either raise your hand, in which case I'll see it, or post a question in the Q&A box. Just as a reminder, please don't use the chat, because I'm not monitoring the chat, but I'm monitoring the Q&A. So we have a question from Mike Esten. Mike, I've allowed, if you can just unmute yourself and ask a question.
Right. Declan, I thought that was a very interesting area. Very tempted to go there. You mentioned the question of maps being better on your mobile. Presumably one's got past the era when the old Soviet military maps were the thing to use in that area. What mapping system were you using?
I can't remember exactly. I think it was 1 in 50,000, but they were sort of more summer hiking maps. They didn't have great terrain detail. I had some free digital mapping on a GPS, but Tommy had an app on his phone that allowed you to zoom in, that allowed you to identify slope angles over 30 degrees, and that actually allowed a much better view of the terrain, better than the 1 in 50,000 paper map, much better than my GPS, which was just, you know, white and contour lines. So in whiteout conditions, Tommy led from the front with using his phone, and some of us had maps out and compasses, and I had my GPS out. But I'm sorry to say, for purists, the phone won out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, if I can add an extra point there, because basically number of places I've been in where, and I've got a really great mapping system. Unfortunately, it only runs on Android, not on Apple. But in fact, Locus Maps, you can get free maps of everywhere in the world, and like Declan was saying, it gives you wonderful things like sort of slope angles and a lot more interesting terrain. And I've been quite a number of places where the only map I've used is actually that on the phone. So it's, yeah, if I can sort of attest to that. Okay, right. Any more questions? Are there any questions? Right. So Nick, Nick Putnam, okay, I've opened you up. If you unmute yourself.
Thanks, Declan.
Hi, Nick.
Good evening. Fascinating. Lovely to hear you and see you. Obviously, a great place to visit. I'm wondering about how hard it is to get there. So I'd love you to say a little about that. Because from what we can see, the facilities are great. The snow and mountains are lovely. And I'm imagining it's reasonable prices and everything in Romania. But I'm just curious how hard it is to reach the country.
We did look at flying. You could fly straight to you could fly to Bucharest and then get an internal flight up. But by far the easiest for us was a budget airline, Wizz Air, direct from Luton to Cluj. Now, I'm not sure whether they have survived. I haven't checked, but we flew to Cluj and grouped there, and it allowed us, I mean, we probably would have had a 3 to 4 hour car journey to the Rodnai if we had gone there, but it was a good base, yeah, to fly into.
Good.
Travel was relatively easily, you know, it's a, you know, a good road system. Yeah, I would have said it's quite easy to travel. I mean, it really helped to have Tommy speaking the language. I think in some of the smaller villages, English wasn't spoken. But yes, given that proviso, it was quite easy to travel around.
Great, thanks.
Right, okay. Right, we've Nigel, I noticed I've sort of enabled you to talk. Was that a question you had, or have I made you talk accidentally?
Hello, hi. No, I enjoyed both the talks. Thanks to Robert and to Declan. It's very interesting, and I guess probably a question, perhaps both. You know, do you see potential to go back and explore, you know, further areas within both Crete or Romania? Have you got intentions to do further trips there, or was the experience you know, enough on this occasion and you're going to explore somewhere else?
Maybe I'll go first. I certainly love to go back to Romania. I'm hoping to go back and do some summer walking and climbing. I know Tommy is keen to go back and lead further trips there. I think with global warming, the snow reliability may be a question. Maybe we just had a bad year last winter. I think there is a lot to be done there. If you had hoped to, shall we say, link together huts, I'm not sure. That would take a lot more local knowledge. But if you wanted to, as we did, skin in, base yourself at a hut and do what was possible from there. But linking up huts, we thought would be difficult.
Thanks, Declan. Yeah, lovely.
Okay, right. So, so we've actually got a question from Alex. So, Alex, if you want to unmute yourself.
Oh, a question and a comment. There are a couple of high-level roads over the main ridge, the Trans-Fagarash Highway, and I forget what the other is. I'm just wondering if you knew whether it was possible to drive to any height up those roads and get a reasonably high starting point. And the comment was that I've been there in the summer, and southwest of Brasov, there's a national park, and it's possible to go to the ranges from a height, and you can get a good view of the bears from there. But in winter, I think they're sleeping.
Yeah.
But so is it possible to drive up from the highways? Did you investigate that at all?
We didn't investigate, but I think it is possible generally to cross at the main road that goes over the Fagarash. There are roads up onto the Bucheji Plateau. They were definitely closed, and so you know, there wasn't great. Well, you could have driven up quite a way actually, but the traverse of the plateau wouldn't have been possible. Yeah.
So, yeah, right. So, Tom, if I'll unmute you if you want to ask your questions. I believe you had a question from the first talk as well. So.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you, Declan and Robert, for some fascinating talks about ski touring in some amazing off-the-beaten-track areas. I actually had a question for Robert about touring in Crete, and having done some touring on Mount Parnassus, the terrain there is remarkably similar to that in Crete. I was just wondering, though, whether there are any evidence of other people skiing on Crete, apart, of course, from your guides, whether any of the locals do it, or is it very much an unusual pastime there?
So Robert, if you unmute yourself.
Beyond unusual, no, nobody skis on Crete. The hut that we stayed in is used by Chania people when they're doing a walk across the traverse of the White Mountains in summer. But it's unheard of to ski in Crete. Cretans themselves, as I said, they thought we'd come to the wrong island. And we saw no sign of a ski, a boot, anything while we were the whole time on the island. So no, you have it to yourself.
That's fascinating to hear, because I do recall on Cyprus, I think actually there is a small ski resort there that operates when there is enough snow. And one would have thought, being a similar sort of height to the mountains in Crete, that there might have been something in Crete, but clearly not.
Yeah, but I sort of know about the one in Cyprus. I've been there. It's very accessible, actually, and so that's why they've actually got a local Alpine ski club, basically a local ski club on the Troodos Mountains. So it's, you know, very accessible for them. Yeah. Okay, right. So we've got, yeah, just right. So, right, we've actually got a Mike Esten has another question. So Mike, over to you. That's it. Yep.
Right. I think maybe there's a confusion there. Maybe I should have cancelled down my hand from the last question. Oh yes, lower hand. I have lowered my hand. Thank you for answering my first question, Declan. And I have no further questions.
Yes, Mike.
Right. So, but we do have another question. Or do we have another question from Alex?
Not so much a question. There is a dead ski resort on the east side of Mount Ida in Crete. So there used to be a ski resort, but with a very long access road. But because of problems, it's very dead now. I have been there in summer. And also there was a book by Alain Parmentier, a French guide, ski tours around the Mediterranean from the last century. And there's a chapter in that book about ski touring in Crete. So occasionally people have been there, but it's not common, yes.
Okay. So, right. Well, I think I just checking through. I don't see any more questions coming through. So, right. So thank you again, Declan, for another fascinating talk of a remote, in fact, remote part of the sort of fringes of Europe, sort of relatively unvisited. So, what we'll do is I want you to pass over to our president, Ingram Lloyd, who has a few words to say to us. Ingram.
Well, thank you very much indeed, both Declan and Robert. It was a really interesting talk. Declan, for seeing views that we just never saw until we got in the airplane and were leaving Romania, but Alan Davis might have commented on that. So we loved Romania, would love to go back in the summer, I must say. And Robert, it was just so windy. We had part of the snow for us was covered in all the Saharan dust. And one day I was talking to Valerie and suddenly I realized she'd been blown off the ridge and she was a long way below me. So we were blown off Crete and couldn't see much in Romania. But apart from that, both countries were excellent. So thank you very much indeed for a wonderful lecture. And we've had very good attendance. And I'm going to raise my glass to you all for a very happy Christmas, a happy New Year, and stay well, stay safe, and for skiing next year. Happy Christmas to everybody. There we go.